You have been introduced to thallophytes, and now we are going to study in detail about algae. Our syllabus demands of us to study the general characteristics of each class of algae individually, and their specific characteristics involve their body organization, how their body is arranged into different parts if there are any, and then we have to see the type of chloroplast that is present, what food material do they store, and one special emphasis would be laid on their types of reproduction, how they reproduce and produce new plants out of them, because we are dealing with kingdom Plantae and algae is part of it. So do keep in mind that we are dealing with plant cells over here. Now in algae, the general characteristics that we have to study is thallus organization. We know that this is part of thallophyta, that means a tissue level is there but not organ level is present. So the thalloid organization is seen, so we have to see how that thallus is organized. If there is any differentiation that is seen at thallus level, and we would see that there are two classes of algae where the thallus is divided into three parts. What those parts are, we will study now. Then there is the cell structure, how the cell is present, what actually is the cell structure, and you need not to get into detail of this because basically it is a plant cell. When we talk about cell structure, we talk about the organelles, how they are present, what is the difference in the cell structure, basically how the cell structure of one class of algae is different from the other, that is to be studied. Then we talk about the flagellas if they are present. We talk about the pigments that are very important, on the basis of which the classification is made, the nutrition, and when we talk about nutrition, we are talking about the food reserves that they have, because most of them are autotrophic and they are photosynthetic. Now depending upon the type of pigments, the nutrition would vary, and how do they reproduce. So this is what we are going to study under different classes of algae. So the first one is of green algae, and we have Chlorophyce is the name for this. Okay, so when we talk about chlorophyce, you can see chloro word is used for green, and we have green algae over here. Chlorophyce includes all these algae. This is Chlamydomonas, that is unicellular. This is Pediastrum, Eulothrix, Cladophora, Cephalosaurus, Eudogonium, Spirogyra, Codium and Cara. These are the different types of green algae that we see over here, and you will be observing one thing, that whatever algae is seen, if at a higher level, these are microscopic though. The remaining ones, the two that you can see, you are seeing branching pattern over here. Branches are seen. This is known as branch, but this is not properly the branch that we see in higher plants, because here the organization is still thalloid. It just appears like that it is a branching pattern that is observed. Seeing the characteristics of green algae, they are members of Chlorophyceae. Okay, Chlorophyceae, as I told you, it refers to the green part. They share many characteristics with plants, including their photosynthetic pigments and the cell wall composition. So first thing is that their cell wall would be made up of cellulose. Secondly, their photosynthetic pigments would be those that present in higher plants. So they would be chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. They have cellulose in cell wall, they have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. And what is the food reserve material in which the food is stored? That is in the form of starch. Then they have their distribution. They can be found in fresh or salt water. They are single celled, they form colonies, they are multicellular, and they have given examples in each case. If that is single celled, the example happens to be Chlamydomonas. In the case of colonial Chlorophyceae example, we have volvox. It forms a colony, that is a circular colony. You would see this over here. If we have volvox over here, no, it's not given, but it somewhat resembles a circular colony where we have many volvox. Daughter colonies originate from that itself. Then we have multicellular, that is Ulva is an example for that, Cara is an example. And before we go further to brown algae, what we have over here is, let's talk about the reproduction. The reproduction would be, first is vegetative propagation. So the vegetative propagation means is by fragmentation. Okay, so you have to remember that this algae, the green algae, it would propagate vegetatively by the means of propagation, fragmentation. Then the second thing is, we talk about asexual reproduction. So in case of asexual reproduction, you have to remember that the green algae forms zoospores. Zoospores which are formed in zoosporangia. Okay, Now, zoosporangia is the site where these zoospores are formed. They would be asexual spores, that means the spores will not be gametic. So, the zoospores, as the name suggests, it is zoo, which means that they would be motile, and when I am talking about spores which are motile, that means they will be flagellated. So, we have biflagellated zoospores. Okay, coming to the third one, that is, what about sexual reproduction? In case of sexual reproduction, we have isogamy as seen in the case of Spirogyra. We have anisogamy as seen in the case of Volvox, and we have oogamy as seen in the case of Cara. So, we have discussed about these terms, what they individually mean. Isogamy is when the gametes are going to be of similar size. Anisogamy, the gametes would be of dissimilar sizes, and in the case of oogamy, we will have a non-motile female gamete and a motile male gamete. The male gamete would come to the female gamete and fertilization would take place. So, this is about the reproduction in the case of green algae, and we have discussed their certain characteristics. One thing we have missed, that what about their flagella? We did talk about that when we have to deal with their class characteristics, we have to talk about flagella. So, their flagella are apical and they could vary from 2 to 8. The number of flagella could be from 2, it could range from 2, between 2 to 8 the flagella would be there, and the position of the flagella would be apical. So, this is about green algae, all about green algae. Next we deal with the brown algae.